Welcome back to another episode of Spirit of an Athlete. I'm your host, Amanda Smith, and on this episode, I interview Cathy Cury, who is a certified functional medicine health coach. In this episode, we talk about her journey to becoming a health coach. It's quite unique. She was a self-trained chef that traveled all over the world cooking on yachts. Pretty unique. In this episode, we dive into food and how we should be feeding ourselves, especially in perimenopause and menopause. She shares with us her number one tip on what we should be doing in this time of life in order to help better understand our bodies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Cathy Cury, thank you so much for being on an episode of Spirit of an Athlete with me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so you are a self-taught chef. Share with us where you used this gift and how you use it now.
Well, I started using that gift just because I wanted to travel as a young person, and it allowed me to travel the world, understand flavors, work in kitchens where, they didn't have a lot of women. So I just got to be like trial by fire, kind of a spirit of learning how to cook. And over time, that led to me cooking on yachts, working in different parts of the world as a chef for the rich and famous, but also giving me access to both lots of ingredients and little ingredients, and pushing me to actually have to ride by the seat of my pants in order to feed to a high level people around me, people with lots of dietary restrictions and health concerns and health passions that I got to uh, basically figure out how to work with over 10 years on yachts.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so what was your favorite place to be on a yacht cooking?
That's really hard. I mean, I love traveling in Europe. I've spent a lot of time in the Mediterranean, which is beautiful. But places like cooking in Bali, for example, where you're off the coast and you have this incredible water, or the Maldives where you're just, you're swimming with sharks and, on your break, things like that. I mean, they're super exciting and extremely challenging for a chef, especially probably a self-taught chef, because you're constantly worried about imposter syndrome and worried about, like, will you understand how to deal with the bag of milk that arrived on board? Like, what do is this really milk? Like, what are we doing with this? So there's a lot of, you have the beauty out of the porthole, and then you have the challenges of how do you work with all the different dietary needs of people that you're serving within the constraints of what you have in your kitchen, or in the galley in that case.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so where did this take you in the realm of what you do now?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something that I did in my 20s, late 20s and 30s. And, at some point, family and other considerations come up, and you're like, it's time for me to get off and get my feet on the ground. And because a lot of my success on yachts was because I've always been really health focused. I was a vegetarian for a long time, and then I gave that up as, when I started working as a chef on yachts. But I always really focused on eating the rainbow and nourishing yourself from the inside, and healing yourself through food. That it's what kind of propelled me into being this really well-respected chef, even though self-taught and, not traditional even in my approach. So that is how I sort of got into the realm that I am now, which is I went from cooking on a yacht to opening up a restaurant to COVID to saying, you know what, all I want to focus on is healing people from the inside, working on root causes to people's what's making them feel less now than they were feeling in their 20s or 30s or even 40s. It's sort of a complete passion of mine to take food and all the other parts that go into the lifestyle of enjoying life, and creating something that deals with the root causes of what is holding people back, especially my passion, which is my age group, women in their 40s and 50s.
Okay, so women in their 40s and 50s that are perimenopausal or menopausal, and you've got those challenges to really wrap your head around. Are those the people that you help?
I do. I do. I mean, my passion is for this age group because we are powerhouse women. Like, we have been giving everything we've got to everyone for decades. And oftentimes that in your 40s, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, but most people in their 40s, all of that comes to a head because suddenly the cup that we've been pouring from our whole lives is just empty. And we have a bunch of hormones that are like going crazy. Most of us, many of us don't even know that's what's going on. We just feel like we individually are dying and probably going to be this way forever until it's just over. Like, there's this morbid trajectory downward for a lot of women. And I really feel strongly about wanting to lift up my sisters and say, no, this is not the end. Like, we've got way more power in us and way more longevity and passion and abilities left. So,
My coach, Melissa Seaman, calls these women the wise women. So in indigenous cultures, these are the women who are the torchbearers for all of the knowledge. And ultimately, we want them to be healthy enough to be able to carry that torch too, right?
right, right. And we want them to do it with joy and with
Mm.
empowerment and with this, not overbearing, like, this is the burden that I bear, that I just have to get through it. I just have to make it to the other side. I want people to understand. I want women to understand that they can advocate for themselves and that they can embrace and provide for themselves in ways that really helps them thrive during this time period, that it can be like an amazing awakening period.
Give me an example of some of the worst symptoms that you've heard a woman going through in menopause or even perimenopause.
Man, the list is so long. It's ridiculous. Of some of the, I think some of the scariest pieces are when people talk about with they feel like their skin is super itchy, like they could rip off their face because they just can't get to it. It's just, they're so uncomfortable. One that I faced that I found really scary was uh, the inability to breathe. Like, there are moments at night where I'd actually have to work on my mental mindset on reminding myself how to do it. Like, I need to count, I need to relax, I need to breathe in. Like, that's a real thing. And I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only person. I thought, oh my gosh, this is crazy, but it's not. It's quite common. I think there's a term for it, like air hungry or something.
Mhm.
There's a term for this lack or this sort of constriction of your right breathing passageways. So I think that's some of it. But other things, just like, feelings of helplessness to the point of suicidal thoughts, feeling like you look in the mirror and you almost like it's dysmorphic and you're seeing something that other people don't see. There's a lot of really scary times, especially, for all women. I think that women that have been really passionate, driven, successful really struggle with this time because the brain fog can be extremely debilitating to the point where you're looking at your son and you can't remember what you wanted to say or potentially even his name. Like, there's times where you're like trying to remember your parents' name to give them a call. Like, it's really some pretty drastic slaps in the face during this time.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So, what are some of the strategies you use in order to help these women manage, navigate, and get to the other side of that issue?
Well, so what I focus on is there's some things that we just have been doing for a long time to be successful, or we've, this culture of, I will sleep when I'm dead. I
Uh-huh.
will, I don't need to eat. I can just drink water. I'll be fine. All these different things that we've pushed to the side in order to take care of business or take care of our families or whatever. I really nurture the idea that we've got to advocate for ourselves in order to help anyone else anyway, right? So, first of all, there are a couple of things. One, I really advocate for trying to cut out as much, if not all, added sugar. Added sugar just does all sorts of damage to our metabolisms, to our blood sugar levels, to our brain, right? It's just, I don't find a lot of good from it. So get rid of the sugar, get rid of processed foods, especially ultra processed foods, because our body has to work so much harder to figure out how to deal with all these substances in order to process it. Like, is this friend? Is this foe? So just, attached to your colon or whatever, you don't get rid of it the way you want and you don't absorb the nutrients. So get rid of the ultra processed foods. The other thing that women have to really think about during this time is caffeine. I know that we drink caffeine as a ritual. We drink caffeine to perk ourselves in the afternoon. We have caffeine because we like to go out with our friends. There's lots of different ways that we consume caffeine. And at this time in our lives, caffeine just really, if you're experiencing anxiety, depression, mood swings, fits of rage, all of those things, that really can fall back on caffeine by quite a bit. So I, at least for a time period, cut out caffeine completely. So those are probably the top three things. Another thing I really want to do, if I'm okay to say, I think it's important to get tested. And I don't mean hormone testing per se, like that's its own animal, but I think at this time of a comprehensive metabolic panel is really helpful to understand how your system is working. So
Mhm.
if you get one from your doctor, I also am able to organize them, but they're give you a sense of, what are my kidneys doing? How's my blood sugar? How's my A1C? Am I going towards prediabetes? Like all of those things, like, am I producing energy? It can give you a lot of indications as to why you're feeling the way you do outside of hormones.
All right, let's go back to the sugar.
Sorry, was that too
No.
much?
No, that was
I got
perfect. It gives me
passionate.
Yes, no. It gives me a lot to work with.
Yeah.
So, I can hear it in my audience right now, like, "Oh my gosh, I have to cut sugar out of my diet. How am I gonna do that? What about all these sweet things that I like?" So, as a chef, I'm sure you have you're armed with other sweet things that are not refined processed sugar. What are some examples of those?
Yeah, so I think that the one part about cutting out the sugar, at least for a period of time, is that you realize how you're mentally attached to it in ways that you're not mentally attached to strawberries. However, if you cut out the sugar and just do it, and you add in more whole fruits, especially ones that are in season, then you can, and you mindfully eat them, that you can really capture a lot of that sweet tooth in that process. But there's some things you need to do if you're going to eat raw fruit. You want to think about the whole experience of the sweets that you're missing. So for example, if you love cookies, chocolate chip cookies, there's obviously the sugar element to it. There's a textural element. There's sometimes, a lot of times chocolate into it. So there's different parts of the experience that you want to think about when you're looking at something to change it with. I take out processed sugar. I have a little bit of coconut sugar at my disposal for things that I want to do because it doesn't affect your blood sugar in the same way. But so I'll take various raw fruits and I will, take roasted nuts, put them with that. Maybe I'll make a chia seed pudding with unsweetened almond milk, with just a little bit of pure maple syrup or something like that, just to give it a little bit of something. But then you have the fruit that's actually doing the heavy lifting. And then you're getting the fiber, you're getting the satisfaction from the sweetness, and you're getting antioxidants from it versus whatever that is that you're trying to replace. So that's one thing. And another part of sweets is, a lot of times it's just a ritualistic thing. It's just something that we do, like after dinner, I have this with my coffee, I have that. So if we can kind of break up and break those into pieces, we can start swapping out the habits so that before I do this, I do that. So that's
Mhm.
another a way to look at it.
I love that. I know for me, one of the things that I noticed when I finally cut out white refined processed sugar was my taste buds changed. And every time I have something that has that in it now, I can tell and I don't like it. I don't enjoy it at all. And that took some time to get to that point to train my taste buds to go, "Oh yeah, we don't like that. We do like this." One of the things that I added in was dates. Do you cook with dates or have any good date recipes that you can share?
So I do love dates, but the thing with dates and dried sugar in general is that they're really concentrated sugar. So even though I caution to use them sparingly.
Mhm.
So there I don't. I'll be honest. I know that there are a lot of date power bars and things like that, but I find that most of the people that I work with, it's too much of a concentrated burst.
Yeah.
So even though there's some benefits to it, that's not where I start. That's more like a further down the track type of a thing. If I were to take something and want to make it a richer sweetness, I would say take an apple, put it or a peach, right? Depending on the season, and
Mhm.
roast it on its own so
Ugh.
it caramelizes its sugars.
Yum, yum,
And so
yum.
you get that increased depth that way. And then you can add in some chopped nuts, or other, nuts and seeds to add protein to it rather than going the dried fruit route, even though I do love dates.
Oh, dates are the date I feel like dates were the thing that pulled me in that direction of we can let go of the processed sugar because there's this other sweet thing, right? I am a sweet tooth. I tend towards sweet flavors. And because of that, I had to go on a whole discovery of what does it look like to have sweet things that aren't made from processed sugar. It wasn't really hard though because like when you think about processed sugar, it's in all of your processed foods, right?
Right.
So just get rid of all the processed foods like you said and we're good to go. When so keeping in mind the audience, moms and dads who have athletes that are going to tournaments on the weekends. Every night they have to drive their kid to and from practices or games. They're very, very limited on their time. What is a good strategy for them other than let's just throw a bunch of fruit into a bag and take it with us when it comes to getting that sweet tooth thing that they need?
Yeah. So I would create like a protein and a fat bar, basically, but I would base it in a nut butter instead of in a dried fruit. So you could do it with almond butter or cashew butter, that type of a thing, and then you could add some. And I think in that situation, when you're talking about an athlete that needs quick access to energy, then adding in the coconut sugar, adding in the dates into something like that is more appropriate, and I can see where that would be something that you would do. Uh,
Mhm.
if you are the mom on the sidelines, though,
Yes.
or the dad on the sidelines, I would caution that, going a route that has less of that. But, you can add, again, it's a matter of you have to know yourself to understand how much control you have over that because it is hearty and heavy, but it's also easy to eat without thinking until it's already too late. So you just have to be mindful and understand yourself to know whether or not that's the right fit for you, or also have on the side some other things. So for an athlete at a tournament, I think it's great. I would, base it in a nut butter, add your dates. It would be my preferred dried fruit if you're going to have dried fruit. But then things like coconut flakes, some other textural type things,
Mhm.
like coconut flakes or chia seeds, something like that could be helpful to add more of the textural element.
I like that. I like that you think in texture too.
Mm.
I'm thinking about like smell and, flavor profiles obviously, but then I completely forget about texture. And of course, adding that in, that's a must because we eat with our eyes first, right?
Yeah, well, so there's a texture element also in the satisfaction when you're chewing, right? Which
Mhm.
is why I often suggest, like, say, carrots and cucumbers over pepper, because you don't get this. There's this, just like potato chips. There's something really satisfying about hearing that chunk, that
The
crispy,
crunch.
yeah, crunch. So thinking about that when you're doing it, you want all your senses engaged. You're gonna have more satisfaction if it looks satisfying. So you don't want it to look like poop, for example, if you're making a protein bar. Um, So you got to keep that in mind. But you also don't want it to taste like paste. So, in terms of the how it feels on your tongue. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You have me thinking about the original Cliff Bars. If you go back and think about, okay, the packaging was very basic. It said Cliff across it. Ooh, there was my Illinois accent coming out, or I said it crossed. And when you opened it, it looked like a chunk of poop. And I was like, "Who came up with this?" And then you put it in your mouth, and it was horrible. As far as the flavor was concerned, it was like chalk. They've
Yes.
they've gotten a lot better. They listen to their audience, thank God. Okay, caffeine. So, I'm hearing especially the moms who have to drive their kids to the softball tournaments and the swim meets and all of those things at, like, 5 o'clock in the morning to get there at 6 o'clock so that their kid can warm up to compete at 8 o'clock. They rely on their caffeine.
Okay. Well, for one, when I hear the word rely,
Uh-huh.
it automatically
Alarm
triggers me.
bells. Yes, alarm bells should
So
be going off.
if you have to rely on something like that for your energy, we've got to work on the other pillars of your health. So we have to look at your sleep. We have to look at your stress level. We have to look at your relationships. We have to look at these other pieces in order to understand why caffeine and the mental aspects to it, because there is a physical aspect to it, but there's a lot of mental connections that we cling to caffeine as a need, whereas it's more of a crutch, and we could choose different items, different, whether it's an herbal tea or a matcha tea or even a mushroom tea where you're getting some adaptogen aspects to it. So the brain synapses are firing, but you're not getting the cortisol spike that goes along with caffeine. And the other thing I would say is that when I say this about caffeine, it doesn't mean for everyone and forever. It just means that if you are experiencing some of those symptoms, cutting out caffeine for a time and then reintroducing it in a more manageable way can be really helpful. So that might mean you can you cut it out I cut people out for 3 weeks. And when you add it back in, you don't add sugar, you don't have dairy in there. You just, you have coffee and, we can talk about, depending on the case, if you need something in there, but it's not going to be anything artificial. Um, and then you just keep it to 1 cup in the day. And then by the evening, it's no longer in your system messing with your sleep and your stress and your mood swings. So everyone's different. But if you're relying on it, if you need it, then you need to cut it out
Yeah.
for a time to reset that, because you don't want to need caffeine.
Kathy, I love that you point out the mindset piece because it really is. It's the driver in how we fuel ourselves. Some people blindly fuel themselves throughout the day. They don't have a relationship with food at all. And then maybe if they're going out to dinner, they pay a little bit more attention to their food. What is something that you can recommend for those of us those of us who sometimes have to just shovel it in because we're on the go?
Yeah, so I think it's really important when you are to prepare, right? We all know that we get busy, that we're on the fly. Sometimes we don't have our food with us, or we don't have our kitchen near, and we have to get things on the go. We have to get things out. So knowing that ahead of time, creating a sort of cheat sheet of what your go-to, like what you could do on the fly, is helpful, because usually at that time you're also stressed. So you're not thinking clearly and you just grab whatever you see first. So
Mhm.
preparing for that ahead of time is helpful. I try to focus on protein first and healthy fats, because I'm going to get the most for my each chew. Each time
Literally.
I bite into it, I'm going to get the most out of it. That's going to help fuel me and give me nutrients for my brain power, as well as uh, in just for everything that I'm trying to do. So, uh, nuts. I'm a person that does have nuts with me, just for the just in case where I'm hangry. I process them well. Not everyone does, but I do. So that's one thing that I like to have on the fly. If you're out and you don't have anything, I don't go towards protein bars at the store. Instead, I get a little, hummus, and they sell those little veggie packs now, and I can eat that for a little sustainability. Or I get a banana with nuts. I get the little guacamole pouches with, the little vegetable pack or something. You can get quick fixes that at least open your brain up enough to make a better decision when you have more space to do it.
Why do you not buy a protein bar?
Oh my gosh. So I'm really on the lookout. I spend a lot of time looking because I get a lot of people that post, "Oh, look at this. It's so delicious." It's like 40,000 ingredient labeled protein bar. And for the most part, those protein bars are not made with high quality whey or not very bioavailable vegan protein. And then it's got a bunch of fillers in there. The reason why it tastes like confetti cake is because it's got like a ton of different chemicals in it. Like the reason why it tastes weird is not because of the chocolate that's used. It's because there were 20 other ingredients to put and make it do what it is said to do. So
Mhm.
I think your body has to work a lot harder to process a protein bar than a lot of other choices that you could make just as quickly and as cheaply.
Immediately, my brain goes to the RX bars. So they're simple. They're 5 simple ingredients, right? That's their tagline. That's how they promote their product. But it's mostly dried fruits and just a sprinkling of nuts. And based off of everything that you've shared with us today, I feel like those are probably out for you also. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on how often and what you're doing it for. Like, when is it? When I go down those aisles and I see the people that are discussing what they're choosing and why, a lot of it, they think that it's a good meal replacement, or they think it's going to be, oh, I need to get this many grams of protein. And so I'm going to get it through this bar. So they're not thinking about the variables, and they're not necessarily going to go and work it off. So something that's full of dried fruit, if you were going to go and do a CrossFit workout or something that you're going to need and use all that, maybe something with 5 ingredients where a lot of it is sugar, fructose would be something that wouldn't be a bad thing for the day. But for those that are using it as a meal replacement or to increase their protein, it's it's just not the best choice.
Good to know. My daughter loves those bars, and every time we go past them, I'm like, "No, it's a bad idea because we're just gonna spike your sugar." And she doesn't
Yeah.
need that.
Well, and it's tough because there's a lot of parents that are saying, well, it's better than a candy bar. But
Yeah.
there are a lot of them out there that are just as bad as a candy bar. You might as well just give them a candy bar. It's the same as far as how many chemicals, what nutrients you can actually absorb versus
Mhm.
what nutrients your body has to figure out what to do with. Um, so it's very, very difficult to find a protein bar that you don't make yourself that's going to do what you think it will.
Noted. Okay, what is the number one piece of advice that you would want to give the women that you serve, which are going through perimenopause, menopause, and tend to be on the sidelines?
Well, for one, I think it's really important to do this metabolic testing. Do some sort of get a comprehensive look at what's going on systemically in your body. Because oftentimes when we go to the doctors, they either look at us and make assumptions, or they do basic tests that don't give a full picture. And then they just say everything's in range. So when you go in and say, I feel depressed, I feel anxious, I can't sleep, not the hot flashes. That's just like, that's so, you know, base level. There's so many other things going on. And the doctor will either discount what you have to say, or tell you that, here's some antidepressant, or here's some PTSD medicine, or whatever it is that they're going to give you. It's not going to deal with the root cause of what's going on systemically. So number one is that. The reason why I also advocate for that is because then once you are armed with a test that has more information, especially if you work with someone like myself as a functional medicine practitioner or a functional medicine doctor or dietitian, you have someone that's going to help you look at yourself systemically so that you can work down here where the roots are, so that when you are working on things, your symptoms will go away. So I didn't have to do hormone therapy in order for 90% of my symptoms to go away. Taking out the sugar and the processed food and the caffeine and most of the processed cheeses, those types of things, a lot of my things resolved. So the one is the testing, because you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yep.
And if you have the information, then you can go out and advocate. Advocate at your doctors, advocate with your family. Like everyone wants you around, right? Like you have people that love you. If they knew that you are like on the cusp of type 2 diabetes, then when you say, listen, I need to change what we're eating, they listen to you a little differently, right? So
Mhm.
getting data behind that can say, yeah, no wonder I'm exhausted. I'm not producing ATP. Duh. Those types of data points are helpful. You advocate, and then you also can gauge your progress, quarterly, depending on what you're facing.
I love that. I love that. I love that because I look at the world from it's neither good nor bad, it's data. And the more data I have, the better armed I am to move forward. On a previous episode, talking with another person, we both agreed that that's how we move through the world and handle our anxiety. if we're prepared, armed with information. So I love that that is your number one for these people, for these women. Thank you, Cathy. Where can people find you on the internet?
Yes. So I'm at revupmymetabolism.com, and I'm on Rev Up My Metabolism on all the social media sites as well. I am leading people through 21-day metabolic cleanses, basically, that help set you up for, you know, getting the data and then working through to sort of clear out your system in order to then focus on a lifestyle of health and healing. So that is where you would go to find out more information about that. As well as I have a Facebook group called the Midlife Metabolic Kitchen Club, where I just go through lots of my uh, different recipes and different thought processes on what to incorporate and what to leave behind, swaps, things like that.
Love that. Thank you for doing both of those things for us, sharing that with us. I know I'm going to go check out your Facebook group because one of the tidbits that you told me during our pre interview was that you're the type of chef that doesn't write down the recipes, you just build the thing. And I know because my best friend is also a chef and does things that way. And some of my favorite people that cook for me also do it that way. I know you're a good chef. That's my marker for being a good chef. So I'm definitely going to go check that out. Cathy, thank you so much for being on Spirit of an Athlete with me.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Spirit of an Athlete podcast. If you're struggling with your own gut issues and want more direction, you can get an initial body scan from Amanda at bodywhisperhealing.com. In 20 minutes, you can find out what's wrong, get clarity, map the path forward, and get on track to get back in your game. If this episode hits the spot, please let us know by rating, reviewing, and sharing it with a friend. Subscribe now to hear more inspiring stories from other female college athletes who overcame their health issues. Want more, Amanda? Get inspired by finding more at bodywhisperhealing.com.